Right now, the National Weather Desk, the first storm of the 2025 hurricane season is expected to form shortly. We'll see how hurricane hunters are getting ready.
For us, the season is always busy. We just don't know where it's going to be busy.
Days of rain led to a massive rock slide in Oklahoma, and why a massive earthquake in the Pacific Northwest could force some coastal communities to drop 6 feet or more.
Right near the coastline that could actually drop below sea level.
The invasive spotted lanternfly will soon appear in yards across the mid-Atlantic. And why do storms produce loud thunder?
That's the sound that we hear. It's actually emanating down the lightning bolt.
And why the National Hurricane Center reaches out to people recently impacted by tropical storms.
We want to be respectful of the individuals and what they've experienced.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Angela Brown. The first storm of the hurricane season is expected to form at any time in the eastern Pacific Ocean. The National Hurricane Center says the disturbance off the Mexican coast will likely become Tropical Storm Alvin. For now, the storm is expected to stay offshore, but that could change over the next few days. While the hurricane season in the Pacific began on May 15th, it doesn't start in the Atlantic until Sunday. And hurricane hunter crews, they are getting ready to fly into the eye of the storm. Mobile meteorologist Kelly Foster has more.
There's never a day that is the same. It's always different. Every storm is different. Every season is different. It's always different. It's always dynamic.
For the last 8 years, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Mitchell's job entails working the radar in flight, guiding the crew in and out of the eye wall without causing any significant damage to the aircraft.
Yeah, essentially you're looking for the weaker rain bands. Depending on where that storm is in its cycle, it could be having mesocyclones, which is tornadoes inside the eye wall. You're looking for hail, any kind of deep convection. So anything like that we want to try to avoid if we can.
Mitchell says punching through the eye wall depends on the storm.
I have seen storms that were Cat 5s that were smooth. I have seen tropical storms that would make me want to second guess my job. So it just depends on the day and the storm.
Once through the eye wall, it's then the job of the onboard meteorologist to get the aircraft to the center of the storm to release drop zones from the plane into the water.
So the sonde is going to give you your instrument readings like temperature, pressure, it's tracking wind data because it's using GPS to track that data, relative humidity, all the stuff that feeds into the models to get an idea of what the storm is doing and how it's reacting to the environment. That information goes real time to the National Hurricane Center and they pump it directly into the models.
The hurricane hunters tell us this year the drop zones will be a little bit smaller. They'll drop about 15 to 30 per storm out of this drop zone tube, out of the plane and into the water. And the number of drop zones will depend on the size of the storm. This year's season is predicted to be above average, and the crew is ready.
For us, the season is always busy. We just don't know where it's going to be busy. So it could be the Gulf, it could be the Atlantic, we just don't know. So we're always just bags packed, ready to roll at a moment's notice.
I'm meteorologist Kelly Foster.
Our special look at the upcoming hurricane season is now available to stream on YouTube. Superstorms, the 2025 hurricane season, also takes a high-tech look at the impact rising oceans could have on major coastal cities. And as the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina approaches, a one-time New Orleans meteorologist talks about his family's experience as his wife went into labor just a day before Katrina's arrival. You can find Superstorms by visiting our YouTube channel or searching for Superstorms 2025. Now to the threat of severe storms across the country today. The Storm Prediction Center issued level 2 out of 5 alerts for 2 separate parts of the country. One is for San Antonio and much of the South and West Texas. The other is across portions of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Hail and winds are the primary threats in both regions. Over the weekend, a tornado was confirmed in New Mexico. It was spotted in the small town of Floyd, not far from the Texas border. The storm system also produced significant hail. Thankfully, there are no reports of injuries or damage. Days of rain in Oklahoma triggered a major rock slide. A state highway is now closed as rocks and debris are blocking it. Lauren Henry has details from Fort Gibson, Oklahoma.
Massive rocks and huge tree limbs leave State Highway 80 impassable, and we're told by officials that they are unsure of when crews can get out here to start the removal process.
We haven't had one like this in quite some time.
Officials say no one was injured due to the rock slide, and the Oklahoma Department of Transportation is planning to start the removal and repair process when the threat of falling rocks subsides.
Massive rocks, about the size of maybe a small house, came down due to all the weather and the rain we've had.
It's also been a rainy May in Alabama. As meteorologist Evan Chickvera shows us, it's been enough to wash away the drought.
The northern half of Alabama has had a very wet month of May. In some cases, it's easily the wettest month we've had here since 2021, and in some cases further back than that. 12 inches, nearly 13 in Tuscaloosa, 14 in Fayette. That leads the pack in the state, or at least in the DMA here in central Alabama. 8 in Jasper, up in Hamilton, just over 7. In central Alabama, you look at Aniana, 10 inches of rain. How about Lake Purdy? The big story just over 6 months ago was Lake Purdy at its lowest level since 2016. We've wiped that off the map, 11 inches of rain falling within a 2-mile radius of the lake. 10 inches in Hoover, 12 in Chelsea. You get the idea. A lot of this has come at a time when we needed some rain.
A recent study says a major earthquake in the Pacific Northwest could have a major impact on the coastline. It could trigger a massive tsunami as well as 6 feet or more drop along the coast. That means areas now above sea level would become flood zones. Meteorologist George Wallenberger explains why this could happen.
Let's go back to Geology 101. The Earth's surface, the crust, broken up into more than a dozen plates or tectonic plates, they kind of fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. They move with respect to each other. Every once in a while, as they slide, it sends out a vibration. That vibration is an earthquake. Now, one such boundary is the Cascadia subduction zone. This is where the Juan de Fuca plate, which is made up of oceanic crust, meets up with the North American plate, which is made up of continental crust. Now, oceanic crust is more dense, basaltic, so when these two converge, the oceanic crust tends to subside below, and so that's what we have going on here at this converging boundary. Now, every once in a while, as these plates converge, you get motion along their contact zone. That slip sends out the vibration. That's an earthquake. But what I want to point out is in between these earthquakes, in between motion along this zone, it actually is stuck, but you still have movement. And we know that because GPS sensors actually track the movement on an annual basis. So what happens when you have these plates converging, but there's no motion, there's no movement along the plane zone here? And the answer is distortion, deformation. So you continue to have immense forces that cause the North American plate, the surface, the crust here, to bow upward. We call that uplift, and over millions of years that can generate mountains, but over the course of a few hundred years we can still have substantial rise that can take 1 point and rise above sea level where it was below sea level before, hence the 6-foot rise or drop that we're talking about in this case. Now eventually we'll get to the point where we do get the earthquake, you get slip, and then the surface of the North American crust snaps back partially to its original shape. And that's where you get this little zone here right near the coastline that could actually drop below sea level. So that's what we're talking about when we have these areas that are at an increased risk of being in a flood zone after the earthquake would occur.
A bear caused quite a stir over the weekend after it was spotted walking near an apartment complex and gas station in Utah. Wildlife officials were able to capture it and release it back into the wild. Christian Sita shows us how they did it.
What started as a quiet night in Heber City turned into a wild one when a bear was spotted. Photos show the young male perched in a tree. For wildlife officials, that was good news.
For us to be able to have the bear treed allows us to be able to safely keep it in the area, tranquilize it, and be able to relocate it safely.
Michael Packer with DWR explains using a net, officers caught the sedated bear mid-fall, then held it overnight for monitoring.
Released it at about dusk to give it just enough photo period to be able to reorient and then find its way safely onto the new landscape.
This video shows the moment the bear was set free far from the city, back in the wild. Officials say bear sightings aren't unusual, especially as more people move closer to their habitat.
And coming up on the National Weather Desk, we go one-on-one with the National Hurricane Center to find out why they are now working closely with communities hit hard by storms, and a closer look at the different kinds of thunder and why it can be so loud.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
Welcome back. I'm meteorologist Steve Rudin from WJLA in Washington, D.C. The invasive spotted lanternflies are making a return across the mid-Atlantic. The invasive bugs pose major threat to plants and patios across the region. Joy Wang has more.
Here's the good news. These spotted lanternflies, they can't hurt you, your kids, or your pets. In fact, they don't attack, sting, or bite any of us, but they can seriously hurt vegetation.
There's these little black and white insects here.
You're watching arborist Lou Meyer showing us what the spotted lanternflies look like right now. Nymphs clinging on to branches, getting ready to evolve into adults. Once that happens, they actually look quite beautiful with bright red wings. But here's the problem. They're seriously bad for plants, including hardwood trees, fruit trees, also impacting grapes and hops. The flies feed on the sugar of these plants, depleting some of the plant's nutrients, then processing and excreting them on whatever is below.
What they're excreting is a sticky, sweet, clear substance called honeydew that in turn attracts airborne mold. So anything underneath these trees turn just this black, sooty mold. So your car can get covered in this gunk, your patio. If you're a restaurant with an outdoor patio and you have a tree species that is inundated with these, it could be a real problem.
That mold can block your trees from photosynthesizing, and experts say there are ways to treat those trees with pesticides, but you'll likely want to hire an expert to deal with that.
We are still in severe weather season with lots of thunderstorms, but do you know exactly what thunder is? And there are different kinds. Meteorologist Sharon Ray explains.
Well, first of all, let's talk about where it comes from. As lightning does come out into the atmosphere and drops through the air, it does rapidly heat up the air, causing it to expand and then rapidly contract. That causes a sound wave, and that air, as it cools and contracts quickly, causes that sound wave, which is thunder. That's the sound that we hear. It's actually emanating down the lightning bolt, and that is the sound that comes to our ears. The sound waves do travel along that bolt and then out to us. Now, it just really depends on how close you are to the actual lightning. When we do hear that very loud crack, that is the lightning perpendicular coming down through the air, and it does make that loud crack noise if you're very close to it, because we're hearing it directly from that lightning bolt. However, if it reaches the ground, sometimes you may hear a loud booming sound, and that is when the lightning actually reaches the ground. So the closer you are, the louder it's going to be, and as you know, the loud crack that can make you just jump right out of bed at night. All right, but what about the rumbling? Well, that is caused by sometimes the parallel lightning, the cloud-to-cloud lightning, or sounds from lightning in a distance. So when you have the different lightning strikes from these thunderstorms and some of these that are farther off in the distance, you're hearing different sounds from each one of those, and it does cause a rumbling sound. But there are other factors that can make a difference in the sound of the thunder, and those other factors are the size of the lightning bolt, the air temperature, and of course the terrain.
If you want to know how much rain has fallen during a thunderstorm, meteorologist Christian Bridges shows us how to put together a homemade rain gauge using common household items.
First up, you're going to need a 2-liter bottle, some tape, a Sharpie, a ruler, and some scissors, some paper clips, some water, and some rocks that you can just find in your yard, usually some smaller rocks. The first step we're going to do is we are going to cut the top of that 2-liter bottle off where the narrow part meets the wide part of the bottle. Cut neatly around carefully to take that top of the bottle off. Next up, we're going to pour some rocks into the bottom of this bottle, about a ½ inch of them, just enough to cover the bottom and weigh it down. This is so it doesn't get knocked over when the winds are blowing. Next up, we're going to pour some water over those rocks, and just enough to cover them. This will be sort of the zero line here for our rain gauge, and we'll measure the rain up from there. Next up, we'll put in our top upside down. This will allow the rain to get funneled into the gauge, and you can secure that using those 2 paper clips, one on either side. Next up, we're going to take our ruler and our tape, cut off a piece of tape, which I've already done here. You're going to put it alongside the ruler and very carefully make a marking at each inch so you can know how much rain has fallen. Finally, we're going to take that tape, we're going to place it on our bottle here, very carefully matching up the bottom of the tape with that water line, and that will be our 0 line, and any rain we get will accumulate on top of that, and that is how you can measure it. And make sure to dump it out after each rain event. So there you go. You can make a rain gauge in just a few minutes right at home to measure all the rain in your backyard.
The National Hurricane Center in Miami is gearing up for the 2025 hurricane season, and their forecasts are more precise than ever. Now the focus has shifted to communication. Emily Gracie sat down with the deputy director to hear about the work they're conducting in communities recently impacted by hurricanes, an effort they say will help with effective messaging before a storm's arrival.
We want to be respectful of the individuals and what they've experienced. So when we do this, it's very quiet, and that has resulted in people not realizing that we do that. And so we do it for twofold. One, to chronicle the storm. In situ observations have never and will never fully encapsulate or sort of document a disaster. To really understand a disaster, you have to be boots on the ground, damage assessment, damage surveys, and understanding what it did to the community. Do you have any watermarks in your home? Can you help me find it? Can you help me tell me what you saw, what you experienced? Did you stay? Why did you stay? Did you leave? Why did you leave? What specifically did you hear that made you leave? This is some of the most enriching parts of the job in terms of determining what we do next. It's also incredibly therapeutic to the individual. Like, they're under massive duress and strain. And for us to show up and say, we're here to properly document what you experienced and to ensure we learn from it.
It has to be quite the weight to bear, though, in understanding exactly the role that the forecasters are playing, the communicators are playing when you see it on the ground like that post-storm.
And you learn so many things. People are so crystal clear when they communicate after a disaster like that. I mean, they're able to communicate precisely what they heard and what they thought when they heard that and how that motivated action.
Any of those surprise you? Any of those moves were just completely out of the blue that you didn't know about before?
Well, generally speaking, there's a tipping point. So people are optimistic both that the storm's going to miss them or their ability to weather it. And then there's a trend, there's a shift. So the track shifts, or the intensity goes up, or the intensity forecast goes up, or the hazard goes up, surge goes up. And at some point that just pushes them over, and they say, that's enough.
To hear the full in-depth discussion with Jamie, check out this week's episode of our podcast, Off the Radar. Learn about the steps you should take now to prepare for potential tropical impacts this season. Find Off the Radar anywhere you find your podcasts. And now for a short break, but first we take in the beautiful views over South Dakota.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
We talk a lot about clouds here on the National Weather Desk. Today we want to tell you about shelf clouds. Here's meteorologist Teresa Carter.
We see a lot of these during severe weather season. This is a shelf cloud. They are often seen at the leading edge of strong thunderstorms. Another way to identify a shelf cloud is that it takes up most of the horizon. It's not a small cloud feature. Here's what is happening within this cloud. As rain-cooled air rushes downward out of the thunderstorm, known as a downdraft, warm air is lifted upward out ahead of the storm to replace that cooler air. When that warm air rises, it condenses and forms the shelf cloud. As the shelf cloud moves through, you will immediately notice high winds and a big temperature drop. This is followed by heavy rain and sometimes hail. While shelf clouds themselves are not inherently dangerous, they are associated with severe weather events and should be taken as a warning to seek shelter indoors and stay informed about changing weather conditions.